My children erased me from their lives for 5 straight years. I kept calling, sending gifts, and visiting, but I never got a response. They thought I was just a senile old man waiting to die in a dusty house, a burden they could ignore until the will was read. They were wrong. When they threw a birthday party for a dog on the night of my 45th wedding anniversary, I didn't get mad. I got even. I sold the house they thought they would inherit. I emptied the trust funds they didn't know existed, and I became a ghost. 3 months later, they were the ones begging, but the man they called father no longer existed. Before I tell you how I systematically dismantled their entitled lives, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to save your own soul. I sat alone at the center table of the Golden Oak, the finest steakhouse in Atlanta. The tablecloth was linen, crisp and white as a surrender flag. In the center of the table sat a small, untouched cake with the number 45 written in elegant gold frosting. It was our anniversary. Beatrice had been gone for 3 years, taken by a sudden stroke that left the house too quiet and my heart too heavy, but I still kept the tradition. We had promised each other 45 years. I was keeping my end of the bargain. The waiter, a young man with kind eyes who reminded me of my son Tyrell, before the world got its hooks in him, approached with a hesitant step. He refilled my water glass, his eyes darting to the 4 empty chairs surrounding me. "Is the rest of your party arriving soon, sir?" he asked softly. I looked at my watch. It was a Patek Philippe, a retirement gift to myself after 40 years of structural engineering, building bridges that connected cities, while my own family bridges crumbled. 7:30. They were 30 minutes late. "They are just running a little behind," I said, my voice steady, though my stomach churned with a familiar acid. "Traffic in the city is terrible this time of year." The waiter nodded, though we both knew the traffic was light on a Tuesday. He left me to my silence. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my blazer. I had texted them all a month ago. I had sent reminders a week ago. I had called this morning. Tyrell, my firstborn, the boy I had taught to throw a spiral and tie a tie. Jasmine, my little girl, for whom I had sold my favorite 1969 Mustang just to pay for her braces and ballet lessons. I dialed Tyrell first. It rang once, twice, then the abrupt click of a decline, sent to voicemail. I stared at the screen, the silence of the restaurant amplifying the rejection. I tried Jasmine next. It rang and rang until her voicemail picked up, her voice bright and cheery, asking the caller to leave a message. I didn't. Instead, I sent a group text. "I am at the Golden Oak. The cake is here. Are you close?" The 3 dots of a typing notification appeared from Jasmine. I held my breath, a foolish hope rising in my chest. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe they were just parking. The message arrived. "Dad, we are so sorry. Something huge came up at work. Emergency meeting. We can't make it. Love you." A meeting. At 7:30 on a Tuesday night. For a middle school art teacher and a mid-level marketing manager. I looked at the empty chairs. I looked at the cake that cost more than my first car. I looked at the waiter who was pretending not to pity me. I paid the bill, leaving a $100 tip. I told the waiter to give the cake to the kitchen staff. I walked out into the cool Georgia night, the humidity clinging to my skin. I should have gone home. I should have gone back to the empty house in the suburbs, poured a glass of whiskey, and toasted to Beatrice's photo. That is what the old Jeremiah would have done. The Jeremiah who made excuses. The Jeremiah who believed that blood was thicker than water. But tonight the air felt different. Tonight the lies tasted like ash in my mouth. I didn't go home. I got into my sedan and drove. I found myself driving toward the affluent neighborhood of Buckhead. I knew the way by heart because I had paid the down payment on the house that sat at the end of the cul-de-sac. Tyrell had cried when I handed him the check, swearing he would pay me back. He never did. He never even mentioned it again. I parked 3 houses down, killing the headlights. The house was blazing with light. Cars lined the driveway. A Lexus I recognized as belonging to my daughter-in-law, Paige. A flashy sports car that belonged to Gavin Jasmine's husband, a man who had never held a job for longer than 6 months, but always had a new business idea that required my capital. I stepped out of the car. The night air carried the sound of music. Jazz, smooth, expensive jazz, ooth. I walked toward the house, staying in the shadows of the manicured hedges I had paid a landscaper to plant last spring. I wasn't an intruder. I was the foundation of this house. But as I crept closer to the bay window of the dining room, I felt like a thief in my own life. I peered through the gap in the curtains. There was no emergency meeting. There were no laptops or spreadsheets. There was a party. Tyrell stood at the head of the table holding a glass of wine. I recognized the bottle. It was a vintage Cabernet from my private cellar, a bottle I had been saving for his promotion, which never came. He had taken it the last time he visited, slipping it into his bag when he thought I wasn't looking. Paige was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on Tyrell's shoulder. Jasmine was there too, feeding prosciutto to her husband Gavin. They looked radiant. They looked happy. They looked relieved. And in the center of the table, where my anniversary cake should have been, sat a dog. It was Paige's white standard poodle, Coco. The dog was wearing a diamond-studded collar and a small party hat. A cake shaped like a bone sat before the animal. They were celebrating the dog's birthday. I stood frozen in the mulch, my dress shoes sinking into the damp earth, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. On the night I mourned my wife and celebrated the union that created them, they were feeding filet mignon to a dog. I watched Tyrell raise his glass for a toast. The window was cracked open slightly to let in the evening breeze, and his voice drifted out clear and sharp. To Coco, he said, his voice slurring slightly, "The only bitch in this house I actually like listening to." Laughter erupted. Paige smacked his arm playfully. "Stop it," she giggled. "But seriously, thank God we didn't have to go to that dinner." I leaned closer, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Jasmine chimed in, taking a sip of her wine. "I know, right? I told him we had a work emergency. He buys anything. He is so desperate for attention, it is pathetic." My knees felt weak. I placed a hand against the brick wall to steady myself. The rough texture bit into my palm, grounding me. Paige swirled her wine glass. "Honestly, Tyrell, you need to put him in a home. The smell is getting to me. Every time we go over there, it smells like old spice and decay. It lingers on my clothes. I can't stand it. I smelled my own lapel. I smelled of expensive cologne and starch. I bathed every day. I kept my house immaculate. Beatrice had taught me that dignity starts with presentation." Tyrell laughed, a deep, cruel sound that I had never heard from him before. He sounded like a stranger. "I know, babe, I know. He is just hanging on, just waiting for him to kick the bucket so we can finally sell that mausoleum of a house and get the liquid cash." "The trust fund has to be unlocking soon, right?" Jasmine nodded eagerly. "Mom's life insurance policy was huge. He hasn't spent a dime of it. He just sits on it like a dragon. It is selfish, really. We could be using that money for investments. Gavin has this crypto idea that is going to blow up." Gavin spoke up, his mouth full. "Yeah, Pop needs to hurry up and die. I've got debts, man." They all laughed again. They clinked their glasses. "To the inheritance," Tyrell said. "To the inheritance," they echoed. I stood there for a long time. I watched them eat the food I had indirectly paid for. I watched them drink my wine. I watched them wish for my death. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of a steel cable finally giving way under too much tension. It was a structural failure. The Jeremiah Cross who loved his children unconditionally, who made excuses for their neglect, who believed that family was everything, died in that flower bed. I looked down at the small gift box in my hand. It contained a vintage Rolex I had bought for Tyrell, planning to give it to him tonight as a surprise, a symbol of passing the torch of manhood. I had polished it myself. I walked over to the large silver trash cans lined up on the side of the garage. I lifted the lid. The smell of rotting garbage wafted up, sweet and cloying. I dropped the Rolex into the muck. It landed with a dull thud on top of a bag of dog waste. Fitting. I didn't storm in. I didn't bang on the door and demand respect. I didn't scream at them for their cruelty. That is what a father would do, hoping to teach a lesson. I wasn't their father anymore. I was a stranger they had just made an enemy of. I walked back to my car. My steps were lighter. The grief that had weighed me down for 3 years since Beatrice died was suddenly gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Clarity is a dangerous thing for a man with resources. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my phone. I scrolled past Tyrell's name. I scrolled past Jasmine's. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, but one I kept on speed dial for emergencies. Arthur Banks answered on the second ring. Arthur was 80 years old, a shark in a 3-piece suit who had retired from criminal law to manage estates because he said the dead were easier to work with than the living. He was the only man on earth who knew exactly how much I was worth. Jeremiah Arthur's voice was gravel and smoke. "It is late." Is everything all right? I looked at the house one last time. I could see their silhouettes dancing in the window. No Arthur. I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. Everything is wrong. But we are going to fix it. There was a pause. What do you need? I need you to open the file, I said. Which file? Project Omega. Arthur inhaled sharply. Jeremiah, are you sure that is the nuclear option? That is the scorched earth protocol. You wrote that up when Beatrice died in case the worst happened. Once we start that, there is no going back. Your children will be destitute. I started the engine. The engine purred a low growl in the quiet night. I don't have children, Arthur. I have parasites. Start the protocol. I want the house listed by morning. I want the accounts frozen by noon. And Arthur, yes, I want to change my name. I hung up the phone and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth looking at. The party was over. The lesson was about to begin. The pain didn't start like they show in the movies. There was no dramatic clutching of the chest, no gasping for final words. It started as a dull ache in the center of my back, like a muscle strain from yard work I hadn't done in years. I was in my kitchen brewing the cheap coffee I bought to keep up the charade of a fixed income when the ache turned into a vice. It felt as if a structural beam inside my chest had suddenly buckled under a load it could no longer carry. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the linoleum, sending shards of ceramic and hot brown liquid across the floor. I tried to take a breath, but the air wouldn't go past my throat. My left arm went numb, a dead weight hanging at my side. I knew what this was. I was 69 years old, and my heart was failing. I collapsed to my knees, the wet floor soaking into my trousers. My vision blurred at the edges, tunneling down to a single point of focus. My phone. It was sitting on the counter just out of reach. I dragged myself across the floor, ignoring the glass cutting into my palms. I needed help. I needed my family. Even after the party, even after the disrespect biology kicked in, I reached for my son. I managed to knock the phone down and dial Tyrell with shaking fingers. The ringing sound echoed in my ear, a lifeline thrown into the dark. 1 ring, 2 rings. I prayed. Please, son, pick up. Just this once, be the man I tried to raise. Hello? Tyrell's voice was impatient, loud against the background noise of a television. Direthal, I wheezed the words, scraping against my throat like sandpaper. Help. I think I'm having a heart attack. There was a pause. I expected panic. I expected the sound of keys jingling, of him running to the car. Instead, I heard a heavy, exaggerated sigh. Oh my God, Dad, stop it. Tyrell's voice dripped with annoyance. We are not doing this today. Paige told me you would try something like this to get attention after we missed your little dinner. No, son, please, I gasped, the room starting to spin. It is real. Cut the drama, Jeremiah, he snapped, using my first name like a curse. I am watching the game. Call 911 if you are actually dying, which we both know you are not. You are just lonely and pathetic. Do not call this number again tonight. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the silence louder than the siren that should have been coming. My own son had listened to his father dying and hung up to watch a football game. The pain in my chest was agonizing, but the pain in my soul was absolute. I slumped forward, my cheek resting on the cold coffee-stained floor. I closed my eyes and waited for the end. I was ready to go. If this was my legacy, if this was what I left behind, there was no point in fighting. I didn't die on that kitchen floor. The next thing I remember is a rhythmic beeping and the smell of antiseptic. I opened my eyes. The lights were too bright. I was in a hospital bed hooked up to machines that hummed and clicked. My chest felt bruised and heavy, but the crushing weight was gone. I turned my head. I expected to see Tyrell in the chair, his head in his hands, guilty and waiting for me to wake up. I expected Jasmine to be crying in the corner. I expected Paige to be fake smiling at a nurse. The chair was empty. A nurse walked in. She was a large woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. She checked the monitors and then looked at me with an expression I knew too well. It was pity. "You are awake, Mr. Cross," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare. Your neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, saw you through the window and called the paramedics. She saved your life." Mrs. Higgins. The elderly widow next door who I barely spoke to. She had done what my own blood refused to do. Did you call my son? I asked, my voice weak. Tyrell Cross. He is my emergency contact. The nurse hesitated. She looked down at her clipboard, avoiding my gaze. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. We tried, Mr. Cross, she said, her voice tight. We called him 4 times when you were admitted. We called your daughter Jasmine too. And I pushed. The nurse sighed and looked me in the eye. Your son blocked the hospital number, sir. He picked up the first time, told us to stop falling for your pranks, and then blocked the main switchboard. We couldn't get through to your daughter either. Her voicemail is full. I stared at the ceiling tiles. They hadn't just ignored me. They had actively blocked the news of my potential death. They didn't want to know. If I died, it would just be a call from a lawyer they were waiting for. A doctor walked in, then a young man who looked too tired for his age. He checked my chart and nodded. Good to see you back with us, Jeremiah, he said. You had a minor myocardial infarction. We placed a stent. You are going to be fine physically, but we need to talk about your living situation. My living situation? I asked. The doctor glanced at the nurse. Look, Mr. Cross Social Services spoke to us. Since you have no family willing to take you in and you live alone, we are concerned about your ability to care for yourself. We have a list of state-funded nursing facilities. They aren't the Ritz, but they will make sure you take your meds. We can effectively discharge you into their care as a ward of the state if you don't have the means to hire private help. He thought I was destitute. He thought I was a discarded old man with nothing to his name but a bad heart and ungrateful children. He saw a charity case. I sat up. The movement made my head spin, but I forced myself to stay upright. I looked at the doctor, then at the nurse. I looked at the empty chair where my son should have been. I am not going to a state facility, I said, my voice gaining strength. Mr. Cross, you can't go home alone, the doctor insisted. You need support. You have nobody. He was right. I had nobody. Jeremiah Cross, the father, the husband, the family man, had nobody. He was a ghost, a relic, a man whose existence was an inconvenience to the people he loved most. But Jeremiah Cross was dead. He died on the kitchen floor when his son hung up the phone. I reached down and grabbed the IV line taped to my hand. The nurse gasped and moved to stop me, but I was faster. I ripped the tape off and pulled the needle out. A stream of dark blood welled up and ran down my hand, dripping onto the pristine white sheets. It didn't hurt. It felt like a release. Mr. Cross, you cannot do that, the doctor shouted. You are not discharged. This is against medical advice. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The hospital gown was drafty, but I didn't care. I stood up. My knees shook, but I locked them. I stood tall. I was 6'2". I had built skyscrapers. I had commanded crews of hundreds of men. I was not a ward of the state. Bring me my clothes, I commanded. My voice was not the voice of a sick old man. It was the voice of a man who had just made the hardest decision of his life. Sir, if you leave, insurance might not cover this, the doctor warned. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I don't care about insurance. Bring me the bill. I will pay it in cash on the way out. Now bring me my clothes. The nurse hurried to the closet and pulled out my slacks and my shirt. I dressed in silence. They watched me, confused and frightened by the sudden shift in my demeanor. I buttoned my shirt over the fresh bruising on my chest. I tied my shoes. I walked to the door and stopped. I looked back at the empty room. Jeremiah Cross died here today, I said to the room. Though nobody understood what I meant, I walked out of the hospital room and down the long, sterile corridor. I didn't look back. I took a taxi straight to the office of Arthur Banks. It was time to bury the man I used to be. It was time for J.C. Freeman to be born, and J.C. Freeman had work to do. The phone rang 2 days after I walked out of the hospital. I was sitting in the living room of the house that Tyrell and Jasmine called a mausoleum. The air was still and stale, smelling of the lemon polish Beatrice used to love and the underlying scent of a life that had gone on too long. I looked at the caller ID. It was Jasmine. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. I needed to compose my voice. I needed to sound like the father they thought they knew, the pushover, the wallet, with a pulse. Hello, Jasmine, I said. My voice was raspy, which wasn't an act. The stent in my chest was a constant throbbing reminder of my mortality. Dad. Her voice was high, breathless, and completely devoid of concern. We were so worried, Tyrell said you called him the other night acting all weird. Are you okay? She didn't ask if I was in the hospital. She didn't ask if I was alive. She asked if I was done acting weird. I am fine, sweetheart. I lied. Just a little indigestion. I overreacted. Old age, you know. There was a palpable sigh of relief on the other end. Oh, thank God. You really shouldn't scare us like that. Anyway, listen, Gavin and I were talking. Remember that investment opportunity we told you about, the crypto thing? The window is closing, Dad. It is going to explode. We just need $50,000 to get in on the ground floor. We could pay you back double by Christmas. $50,000. I had just survived a heart attack, my son had blocked my number, and my daughter was asking for $50,000 for invisible money. It sounds interesting, I said, forcing a warmth into my tone that felt like swallowing glass. Why don't you all come over this Sunday, bring Tyrell and Paige. I will cook dinner. We can sit down, go over the numbers, and I will write you a check. Really? She squealed, like she was 5 years old and I had just promised her a pony. Oh my God, Dad, you are the best. Tyrell will be so happy. He has been stressing about money lately. We will be there at 5. Love you. The line went dead. Love you. The words were a transaction fee, the cost of doing business. I put the phone down on the side table. They were coming on Sunday. That gave me 4 days. They thought they were coming to collect a check. They were coming to find a crater. I didn't wait for Sunday. I didn't even wait for the sun to go down. I picked up the phone again and dialed a number from a billboard I had passed 1,000 times on the highway. We buy ugly houses. Cash. Fast. No questions. The agent arrived an hour later. He was a slick man in a cheap suit who smelled of tobacco and desperation. He walked through my home, tapping on walls, looking at the crown molding I had installed with my own hands, eyeing the hardwood floors Beatrice and I had refinished one hot July summer. He saw a desperate old man. He saw blood in the water. I can give you $200,000 cash closing in 48 hours, he said, trying to hide a smirk. The house was worth $600,000 easily. Done, I said. He blinked, stunned. He expected a negotiation. He expected me to fight for the value of my life's work. There is one condition, I added. What is that? I want everything gone. Tonight. I don't want to pack. I don't want to move furniture. I want this house empty by morning. You handle the disposal. He looked around at the antiques, the grand piano, the china cabinet filled with Waterford crystal. You want to trash all this? Some of this stuff is worth money, old-timer. I am not selling the furniture, I said coldly. I am selling the space. Do you want the house or not? He scrambled to get the paperwork out of his briefcase. I signed the deed. I signed the transfer. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the house wasn't legally mine. It belonged to the Beatrice Cross Revocable Trust. I was the sole trustee with absolute power to liquidate. My children weren't beneficiaries. They were contingent upon my death. And as far as the law was concerned, I was very much alive. The money was wired to the trust account within the hour. The agent made a call. By sunset, the trucks arrived. Not moving trucks, dump trucks. I stood on the front lawn as the crew went to work. They were efficient, brutal. They didn't wrap the china in bubble wrap. They swept it into large plastic bins with shovels. I heard the crash of crystal shattering, the sound of porcelain breaking. It sounded like music. 2 men carried out the sofa where I had held Jasmine when she had the chicken pox. They tossed it into the back of the crusher. The hydraulic press whined and groaned, metal teeth biting into fabric and wood. I watched them bring out the photo albums. Boxes and boxes of them. Tyrell's first steps, Jasmine's graduation, Christmas mornings, Beatrice's smile in front of the Eiffel Tower. Hey, buddy, one of the workers called out, holding up a leather-bound album. You sure you don't want to keep these? It's family photos. I looked at the album. I looked at the smiling faces of the children who had blocked my number while I was dying. Trash it, I said. He shrugged and tossed it onto the pile. The compactor engaged. I watched as the heavy metal plate descended. I saw Tyrell's face, 6 years old, missing a front tooth, smiling at the camera. The metal plate hit it. The spine of the album snapped. The photos crumpled. The past was ground into pulp and buried under a bag of kitchen waste. I felt nothing. No tears, no regret. Just a lightness spreading through my chest, expanding where the pain used to be. I wasn't destroying my memories. I was destroying their leverage. I was destroying the museum of a man who no longer existed. They brought out my clothes, my suits, my engineering awards, the plaque they gave me for the bridge in Savannah. All of it went into the maw of the truck. By 3 a.m., the house was empty. It was just walls and floors. The echoes of 40 years were silenced. The agent handed me a set of keys to a rental car he had arranged as part of the deal. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Cross," he said, looking at the empty shell of a home. "You are a strange man." "You have no idea," I muttered. I stood in the center of the living room one last time. The moonlight streamed through the bare windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. This was where I had told them I loved them. This was where I had forgiven them time and time again. I walked to the fireplace. I reached up and closed the flue. I walked to the thermostat and turned the system off. I wasn't leaving a home. I was leaving a carcass. I walked out the front door and locked it for the last time. I tossed the keys into the bushes. Let the new owner find them. Or let Tyrell find them when he came on Sunday to beg for money. A black sedan pulled up to the curb just as the dump trucks were rumbling away. The window rolled down. It was a courier from Arthur Banks's office. "Mr. Cross?" he asked. "Not anymore," I said. He handed me a thick manila envelope. I opened it under the street lamp. Inside was a passport, a driver's license, a social security card, a birth certificate. The photo was me, but the eyes were different, harder. The name printed on the license was J.C. Freeman. Jeremiah Cross was the man who built bridges. J.C. Freeman was the man who burned them. I slid the documents into my inner pocket. They felt heavy like a weapon. I had kept one bag, a small duffel with a few changes of clothes, my laptop, and the urn containing Beatrice's ashes. She was coming with me. She wouldn't want to stay in a house owned by a stranger, and she certainly wouldn't want to be left for the children who had forgotten her anniversary. I hailed a taxi. I didn't want to drive. I wanted to be driven away from this life. "Where to?" the driver asked, eyeing the empty house and the lone bag. "The airport," I said. "You going on vacation?" I looked back at the dark house at the end of the cul-de-sac. It looked small now, insignificant. "No," I said, turning forward. "I am going to a funeral." I didn't tell him it was mine. As the taxi pulled away, I took out my phone. I removed the SIM card. I snapped it in half. I rolled down the window and flicked the pieces out onto the asphalt. Jasmine and Tyrell would arrive on Sunday at 5 o'clock sharp. They would be dressed in their Sunday best, fake smiles plastered on their faces, hands out for a check. They would find a locked door. They would find an empty house. They would find that the father they thought they could use and discard had vanished into thin air. And the best part? They wouldn't even be able to call me to complain. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The engine hummed beneath me. For the first time in 5 years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like victory. Sunday arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. I wasn't there to see it, but I can picture the scene with the clarity of a structural blueprint. I knew my son. I knew his habits. I knew his greed. Tyrell and Paige pulled up to the curb at 5 o'clock sharp, just as they had promised. They were driving the BMW I had helped them lease 3 years ago, the one they claimed was essential for Tyrell's image at a job he was barely holding on to. They stepped out of the car looking like they were attending a garden party. Tyrell wore a polo shirt tucked into khakis, the uniform of the suburban success story he desperately wanted to be. Paige was in a sundress holding a bottle of cheap wine that she probably bought at a gas station on the way over. It was a peace offering that cost less than the gas it took to get there. They walked up the driveway past the empty spot where the rose bushes used to be. They didn't notice the bare earth. They didn't notice that the curtains were gone from the windows. They only saw the front door and the checkbook they imagined was waiting behind it. Tyrell stepped up to the porch and pulled out his key ring. He had kept his key to my house on his ring for 15 years, a symbol of his access to my life and my wallet. He slid the key into the lock and turned it. It didn't move. He frowned and jiggled it. He pulled it out and looked at it, then shoved it back in with more force. He twisted it hard enough to bend the brass. The lock remained solid. I had paid the locksmith extra for a deadbolt that could withstand a battering ram. "What is wrong with it?" Paige asked, her voice tight with the impatience she usually reserved for waitstaff. "It is stuck," Tyrell muttered. He rang the doorbell. He rang it again. Then he started pounding on the wood. "Dad," he shouted. "Dad, open up. It is us. We are here for dinner." The door didn't open for a long time. They stood there, the humidity wilting Paige's hair, the irritation radiating off them like heat waves. Tyrell tried the handle again, rattling it violently. Suddenly the lock clicked from the inside. The door swung open. Tyrell put on his best smile, the one he used when he wanted money. Hey, Dad, we were just... The smile died on his face. The man standing in the doorway was not me. He was a man named Buck, the new owner I had sold the house to for cash. Buck was 6'4" with tattoos running up his neck and arms thick as tree trunks. He was wearing a grease-stained tank top and holding a half-eaten sandwich. Beside him, straining against a heavy chain collar, was a pit bull that looked like it chewed cinder blocks for recreation. "Who the hell are you?" Buck asked. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. Tyrell took a step back, nearly tripping over his own expensive loafers. "Where is my father?" Tyrell stammered. "Where is Jeremiah Cross?" Buck took a bite of his sandwich and chewed slowly. "Don't know no Jeremiah. I bought this place 3 days ago. Cash deal. Now get off my porch before Brutus here gets to thinking you look like lunch." Paige stepped forward, her entitlement overriding her survival instinct. "You can't just buy this house," she screeched. "This is my father-in-law's house. He wouldn't sell it. He is senile. You took advantage of him." Buck laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. Lady Nobody took advantage of nobody. The old man was sharp as a tack. He wanted out. He wanted everything gone. Now move it. The dog barked a sound like a gunshot in the quiet cul-de-sac. Tyrell grabbed Paige's arm and dragged her backward. They stumbled down the driveway, looking back at the house that was supposed to be their inheritance. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed the finality of a gavel coming down. They stood on the sidewalk, staring at the closed door. Tyrell pulled out his phone and dialed my number. I imagine he heard the automated message telling him the number was disconnected. He called Jasmine. He called Gavin. Panic was setting in. It wasn't the panic of losing a father. It was the panic of losing an asset. "We need to go to the bank," Paige hissed, her face pale. "We need to check the accounts. If he sold the house, he has the cash. We have to stop him before he loses it or gives it away." They scrambled into the BMW and peeled away from the curb, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. They drove like maniacs to the branch of the First National Bank where I had banked for 40 years. It was Sunday evening, so the lobby was closed, but the ATM vestibule was open. Tyrell had a card for a joint account we had set up years ago for emergencies. He thought it was his safety net. He didn't know I had closed it on Friday morning. They parked in the fire lane and ran to the machine. Tyrell jammed the card into the slot. He punched in the PIN code. "Invalid card." He tried again. "Invalid card. Please contact your financial institution." He kicked the machine. He screamed a curse word that echoed in the small glass room. Paige pushed him aside and tried to use her own card, an authorized user card linked to my primary checking. Transaction denied. Account closed. The screen stared back at them, cool and indifferent. Zero. Nothing. The digital wall was higher and thicker than any physical one I could have built. They waited in the parking lot until morning. They slept in the car, their necks cramped, their anger brewing into a toxic stew. When the bank manager unlocked the doors at 9 o'clock on Monday, they pushed past him before he could even turn on the lights. They marched up to the teller counter. It was Mrs. Gable, a woman who had given Tyrell lollipops when he was a toddler. She looked at him now with a mixture of confusion and alarm. "We need to see the manager," Tyrell demanded, slamming his hands on the counter. "My father's accounts have been hacked. Someone stole his house and drained his money." "Mrs." Gable typed a few keys on her computer. Her face went blank. The professional mask slid into place. "Mr. Cross," she said calmly, "your father came in on Friday. He closed all accounts. He withdrew the balance in a cashier's check. It was done in person. His identification was verified." "That is impossible," Paige shrieked. Her voice cracked high and shrill. "He is mentally incompetent. He had a heart attack last week. He doesn't know what he is doing. You let a senile old man walk out with all his money. We are going to sue this bank into the ground." Security guards began to move toward them. The other customers in the lobby stopped their transactions to watch the spectacle. "Ma'am, please lower your voice," the manager said, stepping out from his office. Mr. Cross was perfectly lucid. He explicitly removed Tyrell from all authorized lists. He said you might come in. He said what Tyrell whispered. He said you would come looking for the money, the manager said. He left a note on the file. "Read it," Paige demanded. "Read it right now." The manager hesitated, then looked at the screen. It says simply, "The party is over." Paige lost control. She swept a cup of pens off the counter. She screamed that I was being manipulated, that I was kidnapped, that this was fraud. She grabbed the manager by his lapel. "Where is he?" she screamed. "Where is the money?" 2 security guards grabbed her by the arms. She kicked and thrashed her heels, scuffing the polished floor. Tyrell tried to intervene, but a third guard blocked his path. "You need to leave the premises immediately," the manager said, his voice cold. "Or we will call the police for trespassing and assault." They were escorted out the double doors. They stood on the sidewalk, the morning sun glaring down on them. They were disheveled, exhausted, and completely cut off. The bank, the house, the phone number, all the tethers they had used to bleed me dry were severed, but parasites do not give up easily. When the host cuts them off, they don't reflect on their behavior, they attack. They drove straight to the police precinct. They walked up to the front desk, their faces masks of tragic concern. They were ready to give the performance of their lives. "We need to report a missing person," Tyrell said to the sergeant on duty. His voice trembled with a fake grief that made my stomach turn, just imagining it. "It is my father, Jeremiah Cross. He is 69. He has a heart condition." The sergeant pulled out a form. "When did you last see him?" "Last week," Tyrell lied. "We went to his house yesterday for dinner and strangers were there. They said he sold the house. He isn't in his right mind, officer. He had a heart attack and left the hospital against medical advice. We think someone has taken advantage of him. He has substantial assets," Paige added quickly, too quickly. She leaned over the desk, her eyes wide and wet with crocodile tears. "He cashed out his life savings. We are terrified that someone has coerced him. He is vulnerable. He needs his medication. He needs us." She didn't mention the dog party. She didn't mention blocking the hospital's number. She didn't mention that they wished for my death just days ago. They painted a picture of a confused, helpless, elderly man wandering the streets with a bag full of cash, prey to the wolves. They didn't realize they were the wolves. The sergeant nodded and typed into the system. "We will put out a bolo. Be on the lookout. Do you have a recent photo?" Tyrell pulled out his phone. He had to scroll back 3 years to find a picture of me. It was from a barbecue back when Beatrice was alive. I was smiling, holding a spatula, looking at my family with love. "Here," Tyrell said, "please find him. We just want him home safe. We just want to take care of him." The sergeant took the phone. "We will do our best, Mr. Cross. If he uses his credit cards or checks into a hotel, we will find him." They walked out of the police station holding hands, looking for all the world like a devastated couple. But as they got to the car, the mask slipped. "If the cops find him," Paige hissed, unlocking the car door, "we have to get him committed immediately. We can't let him spend that cashier's check. If he spends that money, Tyrell, I swear to God, I will leave you." "I know," Tyrell said, starting the engine. "I know. We will get him. He can't hide forever. He is just an old man. How far can he go?" They had no idea. They were looking for Jeremiah Cross. They were looking for a victim. They didn't know that J.C. Freeman was already 3 states away, sitting in a penthouse suite watching the sun rise over a new city and planning the next move. They thought this was a rescue mission. They didn't know it was a war, and they had just fired the first shot at a ghost. The knock on the door of my penthouse suite didn't startle me because I had been expecting it. I knew how the system worked. A missing persons report for a wealthy elderly man with a heart condition was high priority. They tracked my credit history, which was non-existent, and then they tracked my social security number, which led them right to the lease agreement I had signed under my new identity. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. The man looking back wasn't the slumped, defeated father who had begged for his son's attention. I was wearing a bespoke Italian suit, my posture was erect, and my eyes were clear. I opened the door. 2 officers stood there, their hands hovering near their belts, expecting to find a confused, disoriented geriatric patient. Instead, they found J.C. Freeman holding a glass of Pinot Noir that cost more than their weekly paycheck. "Good evening, officers," I said, my voice smooth and authoritative. "Can I help you?" One of the officers, a sergeant with a thick mustache, frowned. "We are looking for a Mr. Jeremiah Cross. We have a report that he is a missing, endangered person. Do you know him?" I smiled and stepped back, gesturing for them to enter. The penthouse was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The furniture was modern leather, the art on the walls abstract and sharp. It was the antithesis of the cluttered, dusty home I had left behind. "Please come in," I said. "I was Jeremiah Cross, but that man no longer exists legally. My name is J.C. Freeman." The officers walked in, looking around the apartment with confusion. They saw the expensive decor, the order, the calm atmosphere. It didn't match the description Tyrell had given them of a senile, helpless old man wandering in a daze. I walked to the marble kitchen island where a neat stack of documents sat waiting. I picked them up and handed them to the sergeant. Here is my court order for the name change approved and sealed 3 days ago, I explained. Here is a competency evaluation from Dr. Chartier. Eris Thorne, the city's leading forensic psychiatrist, dated yesterday. It states unequivocally that I am of sound mind, fully capable of making my own decisions and free of any cognitive decline. And here is my lease. I am not missing, Sergeant. I am hiding. The sergeant flipped through the papers. He read the doctor's report twice. He looked at the raised seal on the name change document. He looked at me. Your family is very worried, Mr. Freeman, the sergeant said, though his tone had shifted from authoritative to respectful. They say you had a heart attack. They say you are vulnerable. I took a sip of my wine. My family is worried about the balance of my bank account, not the beat of my heart. I left of my own free will. I am an adult. I have committed no crime. Is it illegal for a man to move house and change his name? No, sir, the sergeant admitted, handing the papers back. It is not illegal. Then I have a request, I said. You will inform the parties who filed the report that I have been located and that I am safe. You will tell them that I am not in distress. But you will not under any circumstances reveal my location or my new name. I have a right to privacy. If they show up at my door, I will hold your department responsible for the breach. The sergeant nodded slowly. He understood. He had seen enough domestic disputes to know when someone was escaping a bad situation, even if the victim didn't look like the typical profile. We will close the case, Mr. Freeman, the sergeant said. We will tell them you are safe and that you have requested no contact. Good luck, sir. They left. I locked the door and poured another glass of wine. The first line of defense had held. Now came the backlash. Miles away in the cramped living room of Paige's parents' house, the phone rang. Tyrell snatched it up, his knuckles white. I wasn't there, but I know exactly how the conversation went because Arthur Banks had a contact in the precinct who gave us the transcript later. We found him, the sergeant said over the line. Oh, thank God, Tyrell breathed, sagging against the wall. Where is he? Is he at a hospital? Is he confused? We can come get him right now. Mr. Cross, the sergeant interrupted. Your father is safe. He is in a private residence. He is perfectly lucid. He has provided proof of his well-being and legal standing. He has explicitly stated that he does not wish to be contacted by you or your family. We are closing the missing persons file. What? Tyrell shouted. You can't just close it. He is sick. He isn't in his right mind. He thinks he is fine, but he isn't. He has a heart condition. Where is he? You have to tell me. We cannot release that information due to privacy laws, the sergeant said firmly. He is an adult, sir. He has the right to be left alone. Do not file another report. Good night. The line went dead. Tyrell stood there, the dial tone buzzing in his ear. Paige was sitting on the sofa biting her nails. She looked up, her eyes wide and hungry. Well, she asked, did they find the money? Did they find him? Tyrell dropped the phone. He says he is fine. He says he doesn't want to see us. The cops aren't going to do anything. They let him go. Paige stood up, her face twisting into a mask of fury and disbelief. That is impossible. He is a pushover. He is a weak old man. He wouldn't just leave us. He worships you, Tyrell. He worships the ground we walk on. Someone is making him do this. She began to pace her mind, spinning webs of delusion to protect her own ego. It has to be a woman, she declared. That is it. Some gold digger got her claws into him at the hospital. She saw a vulnerable old man with a nest egg and she brainwashed him. She is probably keeping him drugged in some basement while she drains his accounts. Tyrell looked doubtful. Dad hasn't dated since Mom died. He barely talks to anyone. That is exactly why he is the perfect target, Paige insisted, her voice rising in pitch. Or maybe it is a cult. Old people get sucked into those things all the time. They love bomb him, take his assets, and cut him off from his family. That is why he doesn't want to see us. It is classic programming. She grabbed Tyrell by the shoulders. Listen to me. Your father did not choose to leave us. He loves us. He needs us. We are the victims here. Someone has stolen him from us, and we have to save him. How? Tyrell asked, defeated. The cops won't help. We don't know where he is. Paige's eyes narrowed. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. A plan was forming, a plan born of desperation and the absolute refusal to accept that the gravy train had derailed. We use the one thing he hates most, she said. Publicity. Your father is a private man. He hates scenes. He hates embarrassment. So we are going to make a scene so big he can't ignore it. We are going to go to the media. The media? Tyrell asked. Yes, Paige said, a cruel smile touching her lips. We are going to go on the news. We are going to cry. We are going to tell the world that a loving grandfather has been snatched away by predators. We will paint a picture of a devastated family just wanting their patriarch home. The public will eat it up. They will hunt him down for us. If he wants to hide in the dark, we are going to shine a spotlight so bright it burns him. 2 days later, I sat on my leather sofa, the city lights twinkling below me like diamonds on black velvet. I turned on the 85-inch television mounted on the wall. I tuned into the local 6 o'clock news. Arthur had tipped me off that a segment was airing. The anchor, a woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of concern, looked into the camera. Tonight, a family's desperate plea, she said, her voice dropping an octave to signal tragedy. A beloved father and grandfather missing for a week, vanished without a trace. His family fears he has fallen victim to elder abuse and coercion. The screen cut to a pre-recorded interview. They were sitting on a couch holding hands. Tyrell wore a sweater I had given him for Christmas 3 years ago. Paige was wearing no makeup, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail to look humble and tired. Even Jasmine and Gavin were there, looking somber in the background. My father is the kindest man I know, Tyrell said to the reporter, his voice cracking perfectly on cue. He would never leave us. He had a heart attack just days before he disappeared. He was confused. He was scared. Paige wiped a tear from her cheek. We just want him home, she sobbed. We are so worried about his health. He needs his medication. Whoever has him, please just let him call us. We aren't angry. We just love him so much. We miss him. The camera zoomed in on a photo they supplied. It was me at Thanksgiving carving a turkey, looking tired but content. The caption read, "Have you seen Jeremiah?" It is a nightmare, Jasmine added, sniffling. He is our rock. To think someone is taking advantage of him. It breaks my heart. The reporter came back on screen. The family has set up a tip line. They are offering a reward for any information leading to Jeremiah Cross's safe return. If you have seen this man, please call the number on your screen. I took a sip of the Chateau Margaux. It was smooth with notes of blackberry and oak. I watched my children perform the greatest acting roles of their lives. They were good. I had to give them that. They were convincing. To the world I was a victim, a senile old man lost in the storm. To the world they were saints. They thought this would shame me. They thought this would force me out of hiding to protect my reputation. They thought I would call them to stop the circus. They underestimated J.C. Freeman. Jeremiah Cross would have been mortified. J.C. Freeman saw an opportunity. They wanted a public spectacle. I would give them one. But they weren't the heroes of this story. They were the villains, and they had just walked onto the stage without realizing the trapdoor was under their feet. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the tip line. I called Arthur. Did you see it? I asked. I saw it, Arthur replied. It was quite a performance. The public is eating it up. Social media is already rallying behind them. They are calling for a manhunt. Good, I said. Let them rally. Let them get invested. The higher they climb, the harder the fall. What do you want to do? Jeremiah. Release the monster, I said. Arthur paused. Are you sure the file contains everything? The call logs, the receipts, the audio from the voicemail. Everything I commanded. Send it to the rival network. Send it to the investigative reporter who hates fluff pieces. Send it all. They wanted to tell a story about a family. Let's finish the chapter. I hung up. I looked at the screen where Tyrell's tear-streaked face was frozen. You wanted attention, son, I whispered to the pixels. You got it. I poured another glass of wine and settled in. The real show was about to begin. The public sympathy for my children grew like a toxic mold spreading across the walls of social media. For 3 days I sat in my penthouse fortress and watched the world judge a man they had never met. The narrative was simple and effective. I was the confused elderly father who had wandered off, and my children were the saints tirelessly searching for me. The comment sections under the news articles were a cesspool of misplaced righteousness. People I had never met were calling for police to kick down doors. They called me selfish. They called me heartless. They speculated that I had dementia or that I was being manipulated by a younger woman. The hashtag #FindJeremiah was trending locally. Every time I refreshed the page, I saw another stranger vowing to bring me home to the loving arms of Tyrell and Paige. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Paige had managed to weaponize her tears. She posted updates every few hours, photos of us from a decade ago when I was still paying for her student loans. She wrote long, emotional captions about how much she missed my wisdom and my presence at Sunday dinners. Dinners she had spent looking at her phone. Dinners where she had made faces behind my back. The public ate it up. They saw a grieving daughter-in-law. I saw a predator securing her prey. The pressure was mounting. My building management called me to verify my safety because they had received anonymous tips that I might be in the area. The sergeant who closed my case had to issue a statement asking the public to stop flooding the emergency lines. My children were winning the battle of perception. They were riding high on a wave of public adoration, convinced that the pressure would force me to crawl back to them checkbook in hand, begging for forgiveness for worrying them. They were drunk on their own performance. They didn't realize that while they were playing checkers with the media, I was playing chess with their lives. While they were busy giving interviews to the local fluff news channel, Arthur Banks was busy with a courier service. We didn't send the package to the station that was hosting my children's pity party. We sent it to their rival. We sent it to Channel 4, specifically to the desk of Marcus Trent. Trent was an investigative journalist with a reputation for destroying hypocrites. He didn't do human interest stories. He did exposés. He hated liars. And Arthur assured me that Trent would find the contents of the manila envelope very interesting. The package arrived at the station on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there to see Trent open it, but Arthur told me later that the newsroom went silent as the contents were laid out. We called it the receipts. It was a forensic accounting of 5 years of neglect. The first item in the folder was a thick stack of call logs from my cell phone provider. It was a physical representation of my loneliness. 5 years of data, 512 outgoing calls to Tyrell Cross, 3 incoming calls from him, 400 outgoing calls to Jasmine, 0 incoming. The pages were highlighted in yellow and pink, a visual map of a one-sided relationship. It showed calls on Christmas that went unanswered, calls on birthdays that went to voicemail. It showed a father reaching out into the void and finding nothing but silence. Next was the invoice. I had retrieved it from the trash where Paige had carelessly tossed it along with my gift. It was a catering receipt from the Golden Oak dated the same night as my anniversary. But it wasn't for a human dinner. It was itemized. 6 bottles of vintage Cabernet, 3 pounds of Wagyu beef tips, a custom dog-safe cake. The total was nearly $2,000. Pasted next to it was a printout of my text message to them from that night, asking if they were coming to celebrate their mother, and their reply about an emergency work meeting. The juxtaposition was brutal. It showed them partying with a poodle while their father sat alone waiting for a ghost. But the centerpiece of the package was a USB drive. It contained a single audio file. It was the recording of my call to Tyrell on the night of my heart attack. In Georgia, only one party needs to consent to a recording, and I had installed an automatic recording app years ago to help me remember doctor's appointments. I never thought I would use it to destroy my son. The audio was crystal clear. It captured my desperate plea for help. It captured the sound of my breath hitching as my heart failed. And it captured Tyrell's voice. The annoyance. The accusation of drama. The command to stop calling him because he was watching the game. It ended with the click of him hanging up on a dying man. Trent aired the special report on Friday night during prime time. He titled it, "The Truth Behind the Tears." I sat in my living room, a glass of water in my hand, and watched the execution. It wasn't violent. It was digital. The broadcast began with a clip of Tyrell crying on the other channel, claiming he loved me more than anything. Then the screen cut to black. The audio of the 911 call played. My wheezing voice filled millions of living rooms. Then Tyrell's voice cut through the air, cold and dismissive. "Cut the drama, Jeremiah. I am watching the game." The effect was instantaneous. The image on the screen switched to the call logs, scrolling like the credits of a movie, page after page of unanswered calls. Then the receipt for the dog party appeared next to a photo of my empty table at the restaurant. Trent came on screen, his face grim. While the Cross family has been begging the public for help finding their beloved patriarch, records show that on the night he suffered a massive heart attack, his son blocked his number. On the night of his 45th wedding anniversary, his children lied about a work emergency to throw a birthday party for a dog. Jeremiah Cross isn't missing, folks. He is hiding. And looking at this evidence, can you blame him? The court of public opinion didn't just turn, it snapped. The internet is a fickle beast, and its rage is swift. The same people who had been sharing Page's tearful posts began to attack. The comments shifted from prayers to venom. They called them monsters. They called them sociopaths. They analyzed the receipt. They mocked the dog party. The hashtag changed from Find Jeremiah to Leave Jeremiah Alone. But the real damage wasn't online. It was in the real world. Tyrell worked for a mid-sized logistics firm that prided itself on family values. They were a company that put grandfathers in their commercials. They didn't want a man who left his father to die on a kitchen floor representing their brand. On Monday morning, Tyrell walked into his office building. He probably thought the storm would blow over. He probably thought he could spin this. He swiped his badge at the turnstile. The light turned red. Access denied. A security guard, a man Tyrell had walked past every day for 5 years without saying hello to, stepped forward. He wasn't smiling. Mr. Cross, the guard, said loud enough for the morning rush of employees to hear. "You need to come with me. You are not permitted on the floor." Tyrell tried to argue. "Do you know who I am?" "This is a mistake." "It is no mistake," the guard said. He escorted Tyrell to a small side room where a representative from Human Resources was waiting with a cardboard box. His personal effects had already been packed. A photo of Page, a stapler, a stress ball. The HR representative didn't offer him a seat. She handed him a letter. "Mr. Cross, your employment is terminated effective immediately under the morality clause of your contract," she said. Her voice was ice. "We have received thousands of emails over the weekend. Our clients are threatening to pull contracts. You are a liability." "But that recording was out of context," Tyrell stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "My father is sick. He manipulated that." The representative looked at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. "We heard the tape, Tyrell. There is no context that makes hanging up on a dying man acceptable. Please hand over your company phone and laptop. Security will escort you to your vehicle." He was marched out of the building like a criminal. He walked through the lobby carrying his box, his face burning. His former colleagues turned their backs as he passed. The receptionist looked down at her computer. He was a pariah. He stood on the sidewalk, the glass doors sliding shut behind him. He pulled out his personal phone to call Paige to tell her the disaster, to scream about the injustice of it all. But before he could dial, a notification popped up. It was an email from the bank. "Urgent mortgage payment past due. Foreclosure proceedings imminent." He stared at the screen. He had lost his job. He was about to lose his house, and for the first time in his life there was no daddy to call to fix it. He looked up at the sky and screamed a sound of pure, impotent rage. I watched the footage of him leaving the building later that day. Someone had filmed it from a window and uploaded it. I zoomed in on his face. I saw fear. Real fear. Not the fake concern he showed for the cameras. This was the fear of a man who realized the safety net was gone and the ground was very, very hard. I closed the laptop. This was just the beginning. Tyrell had lost his job, but he still had his pride. He still had Paige whispering poison in his ear. He still thought this was a fight he could win. He didn't know that the next blow wasn't going to hit his wallet. It was going to hit his marriage. And I was just getting started. The silence in Tyrell's house was heavy enough to crush a man. He sat at his kitchen table, the granite island cold against his elbows, staring at a pile of envelopes that had arrived in the mail that morning. Losing his job was the initial impact, the car crash that stopped time, but the mail was the whiplash. It was the debris falling from the sky. Every envelope was a demand. Every window pane revealed a new threat. The severance package he had hoped for didn't exist because he was fired for cause. There was no golden parachute, only a long drop onto concrete. He opened the first letter. It was from the leasing company for the BMW. I had co-signed that lease 3 years ago because Tyrell's credit score was mediocre. I had sent a certified letter to the dealership and the bank notifying them that I was withdrawing as a guarantor, effective immediately due to the primary borrower's breach of contract. The letter in Tyrell's hand was a demand for the full remaining balance of the lease, or the immediate return of the vehicle. He didn't have $40,000. He barely had $40 in his checking account after Page's last shopping spree. He opened the second letter. It was from the credit card company. The platinum card he flashed at dinners to impress his friends had a limit of $50,000. It was maxed out. I had been paying the minimums, plus a little extra every month from an account he didn't have access to just to keep his credit afloat. I stopped those payments the day I left the hospital. The letter was a delinquency notice. The interest rate had just spiked to 29%. But the third letter was the one that made him stop breathing. It was from the mortgage lender. When they bought the house, they didn't have the 20% down payment. I had put up a cash collateral bond to secure their loan, a substantial sum that sat in an escrow account earning interest for me while lowering their rate. It was a safety net I had woven to keep my son warm. I had liquidated that bond. The letter stated that without the collateral, the loan-to-value ratio of the property no longer met the bank's underwriting standards. They had 30 days to deposit $150,000 to bring the loan back into compliance, or the bank would initiate foreclosure proceedings. Tyrell dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. He looked around the kitchen at the stainless steel appliances, the custom cabinets, the life he had built on the foundation of my money. It was all sand. He had blocked my number. He had mocked my pain. And now the roof over his head was being repossessed by the ghost of the father he thought he didn't need. He put his head in his hands and wept not for me, but for the lifestyle he was about to lose. Across town, the dominoes were falling with equal precision in Jasmine's life. My daughter sat in the plush waiting room of the St. Jude's Academy, the private school where my grandchildren attended. The tuition was $40,000 a year per child. Jasmine and Gavin didn't have that kind of money. Gavin's crypto investments were worth less than the electricity used to mine them, and Jasmine's art teacher salary barely covered their grocery bill. For 5 years, they believed the children were attending on a merit-based scholarship from a private donor. They strutted around the PTA meetings bragging about how gifted their children were to receive such a prestigious grant. The headmaster, a stern woman named Mrs. Galloway, opened her office door and beckoned Jasmine inside. Jasmine walked in with a smile, expecting praise for her children, or perhaps a request to chair a committee. She sat down, smoothing her skirt, oblivious to the fact that her world was about to end. Mrs. Galloway folded her hands on the desk. "Mrs. Monroe, I am afraid I have some difficult news. We received a notification this morning from the trust that manages the scholarship fund for your children." Jasmine nodded, her smile faltering slightly. "Is everything okay? Did the paperwork get lost?" "The fund has been dissolved," Mrs. Galloway said bluntly. "The benefactor has liquidated the assets and withdrawn all support for future semesters effective immediately." Jasmine blinked. "Dissolved? But why? Who would do that? The kids are doing so well. We can't afford full tuition. You know that." The headmaster slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a copy of the termination notice. Jasmine picked it up. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon until they landed on the name of the entity that had been paying for her children's education for half a decade. The Jeremiah Cross Educational Trust. The air left the room. Jasmine stared at the name. It wasn't a random billionaire. It wasn't a corporate grant. It was her father. For 5 years, while she ignored my calls, while she skipped Father's Day, while she complained about my smell, I had been writing checks to ensure her children had a future. I had been the silent wind beneath her wings, and she had spent 5 years spitting in my face. "Dad," she whispered, the paper shaking in her hand. It was Dad. Mrs. Galloway looked at her with a mixture of confusion and judgment. "You didn't know." Mr. Cross insisted on anonymity. He wanted the children to feel they earned it, but he sent a personal note with the termination. She handed Jasmine a small handwritten card. It was my handwriting. I had written it the morning I left the penthouse to visit Arthur. "Investment in the future requires gratitude in the present. Since you are too busy for the past, you can pay for the future yourselves." Jasmine felt a wave of nausea roll over her. She realized with horrifying clarity that every vacation she took, every new dress she bought, every time she bragged about her lifestyle, she was spending money that should have gone to tuition. She had spent 5 years thinking she was independent, when in reality she was a child playing dress-up in clothes her father bought. "We need a check for the upcoming semester. By Friday," Mrs. Galloway said, her voice cool. "Or we will have to unenroll the children. There is a waiting list." Jasmine walked out of the school in a daze. She got into her car and gripped the steering wheel. The shame was hot and suffocating, but it was quickly replaced by terror. $40,000. They didn't have 4,000. Gavin would kill her. Or she would kill Gavin. She had to fix this. She had to find someone to blame. And she knew exactly who it was. She drove to Tyrell's house. She didn't call first. She drove like a woman possessed, running red lights, her knuckles white. She pulled into the driveway just as Tyrell was pacing on the front lawn, shouting into his phone at a bank representative who had already hung up. Jasmine slammed her car door and marched up the driveway. Tyrell looked up, his face red and blotchy from crying. "Jasmine," he started. "I am in big trouble. Dad cut the— You idiot!" Jasmine screamed, cutting him off. She shoved him in the chest. "You stupid, arrogant idiot. You ruined everything." Tyrell stumbled back, shocked. "What are you talking about?" "The school," she shrieked. "Dad was paying for the school. He was the donor. He just pulled the funding. My kids are getting kicked out on Friday because you had to throw a birthday party for a dog." Tyrell stared at her. He didn't know. Of course he didn't know. I never told them. Paige came out onto the porch, a glass of wine in her hand, looking disheveled and angry. "Don't you dare come here and scream at my husband," she yelled. "We are losing the house. Your father just foreclosed on us, basically. He is a monster." "He isn't a monster," Jasmine yelled back, turning her fury on her sister-in-law. "He was carrying us. All of us. And you witch, you talked Tyrell into ignoring him. You said he was embarrassing. You said he smelled. Well, now we are broke. Are you happy now?" Paige threw her wine glass. It shattered on the driveway near Jasmine's feet. "Get off my property," Paige screamed. "It isn't your property." Jasmine laughed a hysterical, manic sound. "The bank owns it. Dad owns the bank, basically. You own nothing. You are nothing." Tyrell stepped between them, holding his hands up. "Stop it. Both of you stop it. We have to think. We have to fix this." "Fix it?" Jasmine spat. "There is no fixing it. I saw the receipts on the news, Tyrell. I heard the tape. You told him to die while you watched the game. You killed the golden goose, and now we are all going to starve." Gavin pulled up in his sports car, then screeching to a halt. He jumped out, waving a piece of paper. It was a notice from his angel investor group. They had pulled out. The lead investor was an associate of J.C. Freeman. "Who is J.C. Freeman?" Gavin shouted, his face purple. "He just tanked my startup. He blacklisted me." They stood in the driveway, a circular firing squad of blame and panic. The illusion of their success was stripped away, leaving 4 frightened children in adult bodies who had never learned how to survive the winter. They screamed over each other, accusations flying about money, about the past, about who was the favorite and who was the disappointment. I wasn't there to see it, but Arthur told me the neighbors called the police because of the noise. A patrol car arrived to break up the domestic dispute. The same police force they had tried to weaponize against me was now telling them to calm down or go to jail. They stood apart, panting, sweating in the afternoon heat. The family unit was shattered. The money was gone. The respect was gone. And the father they had thrown away was watching from a high tower, holding all the cards, and he wasn't folding. He was raising the stakes. They thought the bottom had fallen out, but they were wrong. They were still falling, and the ground was getting closer every second. Desperation has a smell. It smells like pawn shop dust and stale sweat. It smells like the interior of a car that people have been sleeping in. I wasn't there to smell it on Tyrell and Paige, but I saw the receipts later. When you hit rock bottom, you don't start climbing. You start digging. And my son was digging a hole straight to hell with a shovel his wife handed him. They had no money. The bank accounts were frozen or empty. The credit cards were dead plastic. But Paige refused to accept defeat. She was convinced that if she could just get in a room with me, if she could just corner me physically, she could bully or guilt me into opening the vault. She didn't want a father. She wanted an ATM PIN code. To find a ghost, you need a hunter. But hunters cost money. Paige looked at her finger. The diamond solitaire on her left hand was a 3-carat promise I had helped Tyrell buy when he proposed. She twisted it off. She didn't sell her own jewelry, though. She made Tyrell sell his. She made him gather up his golf clubs, his limited edition sneakers, and the gaming console he played while he ignored my calls. They took it all to a gold and silver exchange in a strip mall. They got pennies on the dollar. It was enough to hire a private investigator, a man named Roach, who operated out of a van and didn't ask questions about restraining orders or ethical conflicts. Roach was good at one thing. He could follow a paper trail. I hadn't made it hard to find J.C. Freeman. I was a registered voter. I had a driver's license. I paid taxes. I was hiding in plain sight behind a name they didn't know existed. It took Roach 48 hours to link the sale of the Cross residence to a shell company managed by Arthur Banks, and from there to a lease agreement in the downtown district signed by a Mr. Freeman. He gave them the address. It was the Meridian, the most exclusive residential tower in the city. It was a fortress of glass and steel guarded by men who wore suits better than the ones Tyrell used to wear to work. They didn't call ahead. They didn't write a letter. They gathered the troops. Tyrell, Paige, Jasmine, and Gavin piled into Jasmine's SUV because the BMW had been repossessed the night before. They drove downtown fueled by caffeine and entitlement. They thought they were on a rescue mission. They thought they were going to save Grandpa from the cult. In reality, they were barbarians at the gate, and they were about to find out that the boiling oil was already hot. I was sitting on my balcony reading a book on Roman history when the concierge called up. His voice was calm, professional. "Mr. Freeman," he said, "there is a group of 4 individuals in the lobby. They claim to be your children. They are demanding to see you. They are quite agitated." I closed my book. I walked to the wall-mounted tablet that controlled the smart home features of the penthouse. I tapped the icon for the lobby security feed. The high-definition camera gave me a perfect view of the circus below. They looked terrible. Tyrell hadn't shaved in days. His shirt was wrinkled. Paige looked manic, her eyes darting around the marble lobby as if calculating the cost of the chandelier. Jasmine was crying, holding a tissue to her nose. Gavin was pacing, looking like a man who wanted to punch something. "Do not let them up," I told the concierge. "But do not kick them out yet either. I want to watch." I poured a glass of water and watched the screen. It was like watching a nature documentary about invasive species encountering a predator they didn't understand. Tyrell was leaning over the desk, shouting at the young woman manning the front. "I know he is here. His name is Jeremiah Cross. You have him listed as Freeman. That is a fake name. He is my father. I have a right to see him." The concierge, a man named Elias who had been a Marine, stepped forward. "Sir, we have no resident by the name of Cross, and Mr. Freeman has strict instructions not to be disturbed. You are trespassing. You need to leave." Paige pushed Tyrell aside. She slammed her hand on the marble desk. "Listen to me, you rent-a-cop. We are not leaving until we see him. He is sick. He is being held against his will. If you don't call him down here right now, I will scream until every resident in this building comes down to see what is happening." Elias didn't flinch. "Ma'am, if you scream, you will be removed. This is a private residence." Gavin stepped up then. He was trying to look tough, puffing out his chest. He was wearing a t-shirt that said, "Crypto King." It was stained. "Listen, buddy," he growled. "We aren't playing games. We know he is upstairs. Just let us up, or things are going to get ugly." I watched from 40 stories up. I felt a strange detachment. These people shared my DNA. I had changed their diapers. I had taught them to ride bikes. I had held them when they cried. Now they were strangers. They were enemies. They didn't want to see me to hug me. They wanted to see me to break me. I tapped the intercom button on the tablet. "Connect me to the lobby speakers, Elias." "Yes, sir," Elias replied. My voice filled the lobby, amplified by the high ceilings. It wasn't the voice of Jeremiah. It was the voice of J.C. Freeman, Tyrell, Paige, Jasmine, Gavin. They froze. They looked around, searching for the source of the voice. They looked up at the ceiling. "Dad," Tyrell shouted. "Dad, come down. We need to talk, please." "Go home," I said. My voice echoed, cold and final. "You have no father here. You have no money here." Paige screamed at the ceiling. "You coward. Come down here and face us. You owe us. You owe us an explanation. You can't just steal our inheritance and run away." "Inheritance," I said, letting the word hang in the air. "Inheritance is what you leave behind when you die. I am very much alive, and I plan on spending every single dime on things that bring me joy. You are not on that list." Jasmine stepped forward, looking at the security camera as if she could see me through the lens. "Dad, please. The kids, they got kicked out of school. We don't have food. Please. Just help us one last time." I looked at her tear-streaked face on my screen. I remembered the text message she sent on my anniversary. "Emergency meeting." "You are adults," I said. "Figure it out." Gavin lost it. He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from a side table and hurled it at the concierge desk. It shattered against the marble front. He lunged at Elias, swinging a wild amateur punch. That was the mistake. You don't attack security at the Meridian. Elias sidestepped the punch with practiced ease. He grabbed Gavin's arm, twisted it behind his back, and slammed him face first into the reception desk. Gavin howled in pain. 2 other security guards materialized from the back office. They didn't look like customer service agents anymore. They looked like bouncers. One guard grabbed Tyrell by the collar of his shirt. Another blocked Paige and Jasmine. "Call the police," Elias ordered his staff, holding Gavin down. "We have an assault." "Wait," Tyrell shouted, struggling. "You can't arrest us. We are his family." I pressed the intercom button one last time. "Elias," I said, "give them the envelope." Elias reached under the desk with his free hand and pulled out a thick red envelope. He tossed it onto the floor in front of Tyrell. "What is this?" Tyrell asked, staring at it. "It is a welcome gift," I said. "Open it." Tyrell picked it up with shaking hands. He tore it open. Inside was a stack of legal documents. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Order of Protection." Arthur Banks had been busy. We had compiled the threatening voicemails, the text messages, the public slander, and the evidence of financial fraud. We had presented it to a judge that morning. He had granted an emergency restraining order against all 4 of them. They were legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or my residence. "You are served," I said. "If you are not off the property in 2 minutes, you will be arrested for violating a court order. Gavin is already going to jail for assault. Who wants to join him?" Paige stared at the paper. She looked at Gavin, pinned to the desk, whining like a child. She looked at the security guards. She realized finally that the game was rigged and she had lost. She turned and ran. She ran out of the revolving doors without looking back. Jasmine followed her, sobbing. Tyrell stood there for a moment longer. He looked up at the camera. He looked right at me. "I hate you," he whispered. "The feeling is mutual, son," I thought, though I didn't say it. "Guard, remove him," I said. The guard dragged Tyrell backward out of the lobby. He kicked and screamed, shouting obscenities until the glass doors cut off the sound. The police arrived 5 minutes later. They cuffed Gavin and led him away. He was crying, begging Jasmine to bail him out, not realizing she didn't have a dime. I watched it all from my tower. I turned off the tablet. The lobby was empty again. The staff was cleaning up the broken glass. Order had been restored. I walked out onto the balcony. The wind was high and cold. I looked down at the city streets, imagining my children scattering like roaches when the lights turn on. They were homeless, jobless, and now they were criminals. I took a deep breath of the thin air. It tasted clean. It tasted like freedom. I had built a fortress to keep the world out, but I had ended up building a castle to rule from, and the king was finally safe on his throne. You would think that after losing their jobs, their home, and their reputation, my children would finally understand that the well had run dry. You would think that sleeping in a cheap motel and dodging debt collectors would humble them. But entitlement is a disease that eats the brain before it kills the host. Instead of apologizing, instead of finding jobs, they decided to light a match in a room full of gasoline. They sued me. The process server intercepted me in the lobby of the Meridian. He was a polite young man who looked apologetic as he handed me a thick stack of documents. I took them upstairs and poured a glass of water before opening the cover. I expected a harassment suit or perhaps a petition for visitation rights with the grandchildren I had never met. What I found was breathtaking in its audacity. It was a lawsuit filed in the Superior Court. The plaintiffs were Tyrell Cross and Paige Cross. The defendant was Jeremiah Cross, currently known as J.C. Freeman. The causes of action were elder abuse, undue influence, and lack of mental capacity. They were suing to annul the sale of my home. They were claiming that on the day I sold the house to Buck, I was suffering from a psychotic break induced by a heart attack. They argued that I was not of sound mind to sign the deed and therefore the transaction was void. They wanted the house back. But that wasn't all. They were also invoking an obscure and rarely used statute regarding filial support, claiming that because I had supported them for 5 years, I had created an implied contract of care. They were demanding alimony from their father. They wanted $5,000 a month in maintenance support to maintain the lifestyle to which they had become accustomed. I read the document twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They were arguing that because I had been generous in the past, I was legally obligated to be generous forever. They were weaponizing my love against me. They had found a lawyer, a man named Sterling Vance, who advertised on the back of bus benches who was willing to take the case on contingency. He smelled money. He saw a wealthy old man and a desperate family, and he thought he could bully me into a settlement. I called Arthur Banks. I read him the summary. I expected him to laugh. He didn't laugh. He sighed the heavy sigh of a man who has seen the bottom of the human soul and found it wanting. Jeremiah Arthur said, his voice gravelly, "This is the last roll of the dice. They are cornered. They know they can't win on the merits, but they are hoping to embarrass you. They think you will pay them just to keep this out of the public record. They are counting on your shame. They forgot that I burned my shame in the fireplace of an empty house," I said. "Do you want to settle?" Arthur asked. "It would be cheaper. A few grand to make them go away." "No," I said. "I want to go to court. I want to look them in the eye." And Arthur, "Yes, bring the laptop, the one from the kitchen." The day of the hearing arrived with a gray drizzle that matched the mood of the proceedings. I wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Tyrell's first car. I walked into the courthouse with Arthur Banks by my side. Arthur moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were sharp as razors. We looked like titans. Tyrell and Paige looked like wraiths. They were sitting at the plaintiff's table, huddled together. Tyrell was wearing a suit that was too big for him, likely bought at a thrift store to replace the ones he had sold. He looked gaunt. Paige looked manic. Her roots were showing her expensive blonde dye job growing out to reveal the mousy brown beneath. She was whispering furiously to their lawyer Vance, a sweaty man in a polyester suit who looked like he slept in his car. When I walked in, Tyrell looked up. For a second I saw a flicker of the boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. But then Paige dug her fingernails into his arm and the look vanished, replaced by a sullen glare. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge entered. The Honorable Justice Marcus Thorne. He was a no-nonsense man with a reputation for hating time-wasters. He sat down and looked over his glasses at the assembly. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, "you may proceed with your opening statement." Vance stood up and buttoned his jacket. He walked to the center of the room and began to weave a fairy tale. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We are here today to protect a vulnerable member of our society. Mr. Jeremiah Cross is a man who suffered a massive cardiac event. In the wake of that trauma, while confused and medicated, he was coerced into liquidating his assets and abandoning the family that loves him." I sat stone still. I watched Paige dab at her dry eyes with a tissue. My client's Vance continued, pointing a thick finger at Tyrell, and Paige have been left destitute by the erratic actions of a man who clearly does not know what he is doing. They were dependent on him. He established a pattern of care for 5 years. To rip that away without notice is not only cruel, it is a breach of the implied contract of familial duty. We ask the court to freeze Mr. Freeman's assets, appoint a guardian ad litem, and restore the status quo until a full competency hearing can be held. It was a good speech. If you didn't know the truth, you might have believed it. You might have seen a tragedy. Vance sat down, looking pleased with himself. The judge turned to our table. "Mr. Banks, do you have a response?" Arthur Banks didn't stand up immediately. He took a sip of water. He adjusted his cufflinks. He let the silence stretch until the air conditioning sounded like a jet engine. Then he stood. He didn't walk to the center of the room. He stayed at the table. "Your Honor." Arthur said, his voice low and powerful. "We have no opening statement. We have no witnesses to call. We believe the plaintiffs have done an excellent job of describing their version of reality." Vance smirked. Paige looked at Tyrell, her eyes wide with hope. They thought Arthur was giving up. They thought I was rolling over. However, Arthur continued, reaching into his briefcase. "We do have one piece of evidence we would like to submit for the court's consideration. It addresses the core of the plaintiff's argument regarding their deep love and concern for their father and the alleged mental state of the defendant." He pulled out a silver laptop. It was my old laptop, the one I had used to manage the trust. But more importantly, it was the base station for the security cameras I had installed in the house 3 years ago. I had installed them after I noticed cash missing from my wallet after Sunday dinners. I never told them about the cameras. "May I approach the bench?" Arthur asked. The judge nodded. Arthur plugged the laptop into the court's AV system. A large screen descended from the ceiling. "This video was recorded 2 years ago," Arthur said. "In the kitchen of the residence the plaintiffs are trying to reclaim. It is dated December 24th, Christmas Eve. The screen flickered to life. It showed my kitchen. The timestamp was 11:30 p.m. I had gone to bed early that night, exhausted from cooking a feast for 12 people. Tyrell and Paige were in the kitchen drinking my eggnog. The audio was crisp. The video showed Paige leaning against the counter holding a glass. "God, he is so exhausting," she said on the screen. "Did you see him hovering over us while we ate? Like a waiter. It is pathetic." Tyrell laughed. "I know. He just wants to feel useful. Let him cook. It saves us money." Paige swirled her drink. "He needs to hurry up and die, Tyrell. Seriously, how long is he going to last? His heart is bad, right? Can't we just stress him out or something? I want that trip to Paris. I want the money in the trust. I am sick of waiting for the old bastard to kick the bucket." On the screen, Tyrell kissed her forehead. "Be patient, babe. He is old. It won't be long. We just have to play the game. Smile, eat his dry turkey, and wait for the inheritance. It is all coming to us anyway." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. I looked at Tyrell. His face was the color of ash. He was staring at the table, unable to lift his head. Paige was frozen. Her mouth slightly open, the fake tears drying on her cheeks like varnish. Judge Thorne stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he slowly turned his gaze to the plaintiff's table. His expression was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet, "do you have any context that could possibly explain why your clients who claim to love their father so deeply were recorded wishing for his death to fund a vacation?" Vance stood up, stammering. He was sweating profusely now. "Your Honor, I was not made aware of this evidence. This is private conversation. Expectation of privacy." "Sit down," the judge barked. Judge Thorne looked at me. He looked at the man who had sat silently while his own flesh and blood plotted his demise. "Mr. Freeman," the judge said, "you have my apologies that this court's time was wasted on such filth." He banged his gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "The case is dismissed with prejudice," the judge thundered. "The plaintiff's claims are meritless, frivolous, and frankly morally repugnant. Furthermore, I am sanctioning the plaintiffs for filing a bad faith lawsuit. You are ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees in full." He wasn't done. He looked at Tyrell and Paige. "And let me be clear," the judge said, "if you ever come into my courtroom again trying to exploit this man, I will hold you in contempt so fast your heads will spin. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Get out of my sight." The bailiff moved toward them. Tyrell stood up, his legs shaking so badly he almost fell. He looked at me. For the first time in 5 years, he really looked at me. He saw the suit. He saw the cold eyes. He saw the stranger he had created. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't answer. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and turned my back on him. Arthur packed up the laptop. We walked out of the courtroom. Behind us, I heard Paige starting to scream at Vance, her voice shrill and panicked. I heard Tyrell trying to shush her. I heard the ruin of their lives collapsing in real time. I walked down the marble steps of the courthouse and into the fresh air. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. I took a deep breath. It was over. The legal tether was cut. They were legally branded as liars and predators. They owed me $50,000 in legal fees they would never be able to pay, which meant their wages would be garnished for the rest of their miserable lives. I hailed a taxi. Arthur patted me on the shoulder. "Well done, JC," he said. "It is a good day," I replied. I didn't go back to the penthouse immediately. I had the driver take me to a park. I sat on a bench and watched normal families playing. I saw fathers pushing swings. I saw children laughing. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, a mourning for the life I thought I had. But then I remembered the video. I remembered the words. I want that trip to Paris. They would never see Paris. They would never see my money. They would never see me. I stood up and walked away from the park. I was J.C. Freeman, and I had a plane to catch. I had always wanted to see the Mediterranean, and now I had nothing holding me back. The court of public opinion does not require a unanimous verdict. It requires a villain. And thanks to the video Arthur Banks played in that courtroom, the internet had found its new favorite monster. Paige thought she could control the narrative with tearful interviews and staged photos, but she forgot that digital footprints are eternal. The video of her in my kitchen holding a glass of my wine and wishing for my death so she could go to Paris leaked online within hours of the judge's dismissal. I never asked how it happened. Court records are public property after all. Someone simply helped them find a wider audience. I sat in my penthouse and watched the view count tick upward like a odometer on a race car. 10,000, 100,000, 2 million. The comments section was a bloodbath. The same strangers who had rallied to find the missing grandfather were now calling for Paige's head on a platter. They doxed her. They found her old tweets. They found her marketing portfolio. They flooded her employer's social media pages with demands for her termination. By Tuesday, Paige was a pariah. She worked for a boutique branding agency that prided itself on image management. They knew a PR disaster when they saw one. She didn't even get a meeting with HR. She got a courier at her door handing her a box of her personal items and a letter stating that her contract was void due to conduct detrimental to the company. She was fired via cardboard box. I saw a photo of her later that week snapped by a neighbor who sold it to a tabloid blog. She was standing on her front porch screaming at a delivery driver, her hair unwashed, wearing sweatpants. She looked like a cornered animal. She had lost her job, she had lost her reputation, and she had lost the social standing she valued more than her own soul. The country club revoked their membership. Her friends stopped returning her texts. She was radioactive. And Tyrell, the man who had followed her lead blindly into the abyss, was standing right next to her watching the fallout rain down on their heads. The loss of reputation was the storm, but the foreclosure was the flood. The 30-day grace period I had triggered by pulling the collateral on the house loan expired on a rainy Wednesday. Banks are not emotional institutions. They are mathematical ones. When the numbers don't add up, they take the asset. The sheriff's deputy arrived at Tyrell's house at 8 in the morning. He wasn't there to arrest anyone. He was there to enforce an eviction order. I wasn't there, but I knew the procedure. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Anything left behind becomes the property of the bank or is hauled to the curb. Tyrell tried to argue. He tried to explain that his father was a wealthy man, that this was all a misunderstanding. The deputy didn't care. He handed Tyrell the notice and stood by the door, hand on his belt, watching. They packed what they could into Jasmine's SUV, which was the only vehicle left since the BMW was long gone. They stuffed clothes into garbage bags. They took the TV. They took the silverware. They left the furniture because they had nowhere to put it. They drove away from the house that was supposed to be their legacy. They didn't go to a hotel. Hotels require credit cards with available balances. They went to the Starlight Motel on the outskirts of the city, a place where they rent rooms by the hour and the sheets are gray from too much bleach and too little washing. I had a man watching them. He sent me photos. Tyrell carrying garbage bags of designer clothes into room 104. Paige sitting in the passenger seat, refusing to get out, staring at the neon sign buzzing overhead. It was a long fall from the manicured lawns of the suburbs to a parking lot filled with cigarette butts and broken glass. But the family reunion was about to get smaller. Gavin, my son-in-law, the crypto visionary who was going to revolutionize finance, looked at the motel room. He looked at the 2 queen beds that 4 adults were supposed to share. He looked at the debt collectors calling his phone every 5 minutes. He did the math. Gavin walked out to the vending machine to get a soda. He kept walking. He walked right out of the parking lot and down the highway. He didn't say goodbye to Jasmine. He didn't leave a note. He just ran. He took the $300 Jasmine had hidden in her makeup bag and vanished. Jasmine called him for 2 days straight before she realized he wasn't coming back. Her husband had abandoned her and their children in a motel room because he couldn't handle the reality of being poor. Jasmine collapsed. She had lost her father, her home, her children's school, and now her husband. She sat on the lumpy mattress of the motel bed and wailed. Tyrell and Paige didn't comfort her. They yelled at her to shut up because the neighbors were banging on the walls. The family unit had dissolved into a cage match of misery. They thought they had hit the bottom. They thought that being homeless and jobless was the worst it could get. They were wrong. They forgot that debt doesn't disappear just because you lose the house. When a bank forecloses, they sell the house at auction. If the sale price doesn't cover the loan balance and the fees, there is a deficiency judgment. You still owe the difference. Tyrell owed the bank $40,000 even after they took the house. He owed the credit card companies another $50,000. He owed the legal fees to me. He was drowning in red ink. Banks and credit card companies often don't want to chase bad debt. They package it up and sell it to collection agencies for pennies on the dollar. These agencies are ruthless. They garnish wages. They freeze bank accounts. They harass you until you pay or declare bankruptcy. I called Arthur Banks. I want to buy the debt, I said. Which debt? Arthur asked. All of it, I replied. The deficiency judgment, the credit cards, the legal fees. Find out who holds the paper and buy it. Use the shell company, Omega Holdings. Arthur chuckled. It was a dark, dry sound. You want to be their debt collector. I want to be their landlord, their banker, and their nightmare, I said. I want to own the paper that owns them. It took a week. Omega Holdings acquired the portfolio of debt belonging to Tyrell Cross and Paige Cross. I bought their financial souls for 12 cents on the dollar. On a Monday morning, a process server knocked on the door of room 104 at the Starlight Motel. Tyrell opened it looking haggard and unshaven. He probably thought it was the motel manager asking for the rent. Mr. Cross, the server said. You have been served. Tyrell took the envelope. It was a notice of assignment. It stated that his debts had been purchased by a new creditor, Omega Holdings, LLC. It stated that due to non-payment, the creditor was initiating immediate wage garnishment if he ever got a job again and seizing any future assets. It was a legal shackle around his ankle. Tyrell didn't know who Omega Holdings was. He didn't know that the CEO was J.C. Freeman. He didn't know that every time he scraped together $10, I would legally be entitled to 5 of them. He just knew that the walls were closing in and there was no exit door. He sat on the edge of the bed and read the letter to Paige. Who are these people? Paige whispered, terrified. Why are they coming after us so hard? We have nothing left. They want blood, Tyrell said, his voice hollow. They aren't going to stop until we are dead. He was close to the truth. I didn't want them dead. I wanted them to understand the weight of the burden they had placed on me for years. I wanted them to feel the crushing pressure of being used. I was teaching them a lesson in economics. The price of ingratitude is interest, and the interest rate is always compounding. I sat in my penthouse, looked at the ledger of debts I now owned, and took a sip of coffee. The balance sheet was finally starting to look correct. The gala for the Beatrice Cross Scholarship Fund was the social event of the season. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Meridian 50 stories above the city. The room was filled with engineers, architects, and philanthropists, people who built things that lasted. I stood at the podium adjusting the microphone. I was wearing a tuxedo that fit perfectly, a stark contrast to the old cardigans I used to wear to hide the fact that I hadn't bought new clothes in a decade. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice projecting across the room. My late wife Beatrice believed that education was the foundation of freedom. Tonight we honor her memory by giving 10 young students the chance to build their own futures without the burden of debt. Applause rippled through the room. I stepped down from the stage and mingled. I shook hands. I smiled. I was J.C. Freeman, the benevolent benefactor. I wasn't a lonely old man anymore. I was a pillar of the community. But pillars cast shadows, and sometimes things crawl out of them. I saw him near the service entrance, Tyrell. He looked like a ghost of the man he used to be. His suit was ill-fitting and clearly second-hand. His hair was thinning and gray at the temples. He had aged 10 years in 3 months. He was holding a small bundle in his arms. It was my grandson Leo, whom I had never met. The boy looked tired, dressed in clothes that were clean but worn. Security moved to intercept him, but I raised a hand. Let him come, I signaled. I wanted to see this. I wanted to see what rock bottom looked like when it walked on 2 legs. Tyrell pushed through the crowd. People parted for him, wrinkling their noses slightly at the desperate energy radiating off him. He stopped 5 feet from me. The music died down. The chatter stopped. All eyes were on us. Dad, Tyrell said, his voice cracking. I looked at him. I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger who had worn my son's face while he stole from me. Mr. Cross, I corrected him. Or Mr. Freeman, if you prefer. Please, Dad, Tyrell begged, shifting the weight of the sleeping child in his arms. We have nothing. Omega Holdings. They take everything. Every paycheck I get from the temp agency, they take half. We are living in a shelter, Dad. A shelter. Paige left me. She went back to her parents. Jasmine is gone. It is just me and Leo. He held the boy out toward me like an offering, like a shield. Look at him, Dad. This is your grandson. He is innocent. He didn't do anything. Please, just help us. Just this once. I am begging you. I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything. I was stupid. I was selfish. But I am your son. Blood is thicker than water, right? He dropped to his knees. He actually knelt on the marble floor, holding my grandson up to me. Tears streamed down his face. It was a powerful image, the prodigal son returning broken and humble. The crowd held its breath. They were waiting for the Hollywood ending. They were waiting for the father to melt, to embrace his child, to forgive all sins in the name of family. I looked at Leo. He was a beautiful child. He had Beatrice's eyes. He looked at me with curiosity, not fear. I looked at Tyrell. I saw the desperation, but I also saw the calculation. He wasn't here because he missed me. He was here because the money was gone. He was here because he had run out of options. He was using a child as a bargaining chip. I took a step closer. I leaned down so only he could hear me. Blood is thicker than water, I whispered. But you drained my blood a long time ago, Tyrell. You watched me bleed out on a kitchen floor, and you changed the channel. I stood up. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the security guards. This man is trespassing, I said loudly. Remove him. Tyrell's face crumpled. Dad. No, you can't do this. He is your grandson. Jeremiah. I turned my back on him. Jeremiah Cross is dead, I said over my shoulder. He died of a broken heart 3 months ago. You killed him. 2 guards grabbed Tyrell by the arms. He screamed. He begged. The baby started to cry, a thin wail that cut through the silence. It was a tragic sound, but it wasn't my tragedy anymore. I walked back to the bar and ordered a scotch. I didn't watch them drag him out. I didn't need to. I had already seen the end of this movie. A woman next to me, a donor named Mrs. Vanderwall, looked at me with wide eyes. That was difficult to watch, she said. It was necessary, I replied, taking a sip of the amber liquid. Sometimes to save the tree you have to prune the rot, even if it hurts. She nodded slowly, then turned back to her conversation. The music started up again. The party continued. Life went on. I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. I felt a twinge of sadness for the boy, for Leo. But I knew that giving Tyrell money wouldn't save Leo. It would only teach Tyrell that he could use people until they broke and then cry until they fixed him. That was a lesson I refused to teach. I was J.C. Freeman, and I had a scholarship fund to manage. There were children out there who wanted to build bridges, not burn them. And I was going to help them. The letter didn't arrive via a process server or a high-priced lawyer. It came through the regular mail tucked between a utility bill and a subscription catalog. The envelope was plain white, the handwriting familiar but shaky. There was no return address, just my name, J.C. Freeman, written in blue ink. I almost threw it away. I had become accustomed to ignoring anything that smelled of my past life. But something about the slant of the letters stopped me. It reminded me of the Father's Day cards I used to receive 2 decades ago, back when my children still needed me to tie their shoes. I opened it sitting on my balcony with a cup of coffee. I expected a demand. I expected a sob story followed by a Venmo link. I expected the same entitlement that had led Tyrell to scream at me in a ballroom. I was wrong. Dear Dad. The letter began. Or Mr. Freeman. I don't know what to call you anymore. I am not writing this to ask for money. I know that door is closed, and honestly, I'm glad it is. If you had given us money 3 months ago, Gavin would have taken it and left anyway. I am writing because I am scared and I don't know what to do. I am working double shifts at a diner in East Atlanta. My feet bleed every night. I haven't bought new clothes in 6 months. The kids are in public school and they hate it, but they are learning. I am learning too. I learned that $1 is hard to make and easy to lose. I learned that pride doesn't pay the rent. I don't want your money, Dad. I just want to know how you did it. How did you build a life from nothing without losing your mind? I feel like I am drowning. If you never answer this, I understand. I wouldn't answer me either. Love, Jasmine. I read the letter 3 times. I looked for the trap. I looked for the hidden agenda. But the paper didn't smell of perfume or desperation. It smelled of grease and fatigue. For the first time in 5 years, my daughter wasn't asking for a fish. She was admitting she didn't know how to swim. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I sent a reply to the address on the postmark. Meet me at Joe's Diner on 4th Street, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Don't be late. Joe's was a neutral ground. It was a place where working people ate breakfast before the second shift. It smelled of bacon grease and sanitizer. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat in a booth facing the door. I wore a simple polo shirt, not the expensive suits I used to armor myself against Tyrell. I wanted to see if she would recognize the man, not the wallet. Jasmine walked in at 9:58. She looked different. The designer handbags were gone. She was wearing a uniform from a different restaurant, a stained apron tucked into a tote bag. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup. She looked tired. She looked 10 years older than the woman who had laughed about my emergency meeting. She looked like her mother. She saw me and hesitated. I didn't stand up. I didn't open my arms. I gestured to the seat across from me. She slid into the booth, keeping her hands in her lap. "Hello, Dad," she said quietly. "Hello, Jasmine," I replied. My voice was neutral. I wasn't cold, but I wasn't warm. I was observing. She ordered a black coffee. She didn't order food even though I could see she was hungry. She counted the change in her purse before the waitress left. "I got your letter," I said. She nodded, looking down at the table. "I didn't think you would come. I thought you would think it was a trick. Was it?" I asked. "No," she said, looking up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Dad, I am so sorry. Not because I lost the money, but because I lost myself. I was a terrible daughter. I was a terrible mother. I let Gavin and Paige and Tyrell convince me that we deserved things we didn't earn. And when the music stopped, I realized I didn't even know how to tie my own shoes." She took a sip of the coffee. It burned her lip, but she didn't flinch. "I work 10 hours a day," she continued. "I serve food to people who treat me like I am invisible. They snap their fingers. They complain about the ice, and every time they do, I see you. I see you sitting at that table on your anniversary. I see how we treated you, and I hate myself." She wasn't crying for show. These were tears of exhaustion and genuine remorse. She had touched the hot stove of reality, and it had burned away the entitlement. "You asked me for advice," I said. "Yes," she whispered. "How do I survive this? How do I keep going when everything is gone?" "You survive by realizing that nothing is gone except the illusions," I said. "You have your health. You have your children. You have your hands. You build from the ground up. You stop looking for a savior, and you start looking for a shovel." She nodded, absorbing the words. "I am trying, Dad. I really am. But I am stuck. I can't get ahead. The rent eats everything. I want to do better for the kids, but I don't have any skills. I was an art teacher at a private school because you knew the board members. I don't have a trade." I reached into my bag. Jasmine flinched slightly, perhaps expecting a lecture or a photo of what she had lost. I pulled out a thick envelope. It was heavy. She stared at it. Her breath hitched. She thought it was cash. She thought it was the bailout. I saw the hope flare in her eyes, the old addiction craving a fix. "Open it," I said. She picked up the envelope. Her hands trembled. She tore the flap. She reached inside. She pulled out a stack of papers. It wasn't money. It was an application form. J.C. Freeman Manufacturing Apprenticeship Program. She looked at me confused. "What is this?" "I own a majority stake in a manufacturing plant just outside the city," I explained. "We make components for green energy infrastructure. We have a program for people with no skills but a willingness to work. It is a 3-year apprenticeship. You start on the floor. You learn logistics, supply chain management, and industrial design." I leaned forward. "It pays $15 an hour to start. That is minimum wage. The hours are long. You will wear steel-toed boots, not heels. You will come home dirty. You will be tired." Jasmine looked at the application. She ran her thumb over the logo. But I continued, "If you show up on time, if you work hard, and if you pass the certifications, your salary doubles in year 2. By year 3, you are a manager. By year 5, you have a career." I pointed at the paper. "This isn't a gift, Jasmine. It is a chance. I am not giving you the job. I am giving you the interview. You have to pass the drug test. You have to pass the aptitude test. You have to show up every day at 6 a.m. If you are late once you are fired, I will not protect you. I will not tell the foreman you are my daughter. To them, you are just another applicant." She looked at the papers, then at me. The disappointment of not finding cash faded, replaced by something else. Determination. She realized that I wasn't offering her a fish. I was offering her a boat, but she had to row it herself. $15 an hour, she murmured. "That is less than I make in tips on a good night." "It is," I agreed. "But tips don't build a future. Skills do. Do you want to serve food for the rest of your life, or do you want to build the table?" She took a deep breath. She picked up a pen from her purse. It was a cheap plastic pen she probably took from the diner. She signed the bottom of the application right there on the table. "I will take it," she said. "I will be there, 6 a.m. She pushed the paper back to me. "I don't want to let you down, Dad," she said. "But more than that, I don't want to let myself down." "Good," I said, taking the application. I stood up. I didn't offer to pay for her coffee. I didn't offer her a ride. She needed to do this on her own. "I will see you at the plant on Monday, Ms. Cross," I said formally. "Don't be late." I walked out of the diner. I paused by the window and looked back. Jasmine was drinking her coffee, reading the pamphlet about the program. She looked scared, but she didn't look lost anymore. Tyrell was still in the wind, chasing easy money and blaming the world. Paige was hiding in shame. But Jasmine had just taken the first step on a long road. It was the hardest thing I ever did, walking away from her without handing her a wad of cash to fix her immediate problems. But as I got into my car, I knew Beatrice would be proud. We hadn't raised children, we had raised dependents. Now finally I was raising an adult. The lesson was harsh, but it was the only one that would stick. The Bank of Dad was closed, but the School of Life was open for enrollment. It has been exactly 1 year since I watched my son get dragged out of a ballroom kicking and screaming. Time has a way of clarifying things that emotion obscures. When you are in the middle of the storm, you can only see the rain, but when you are above the clouds, the view is different. I am sitting on the deck of a 60-foot yacht off the coast of Santorini. The water is a blue that hurts your eyes, it is so bright. The air smells of salt and lemons. I have a file folder in my lap that Arthur Banks sent via courier. It is the final report on the life of Jeremiah Cross. The report details the conclusion of Tyrell's story. It wasn't a happy ending. Desperation makes men do foolish things, but entitlement makes them do criminal things. After the gala, Tyrell didn't get a job. He didn't scrub floors. He didn't humble himself. Instead, he tried to open a line of credit. Since his own credit score was obliterated, he used the social security number of his 3-year-old son, Leo. He tried to take out a $50,000 loan in a toddler's name to fund a lifestyle he felt he was owed. The bank flagged it immediately. Identity theft is a felony, but identity theft of a minor by a parent is a special kind of low. The judge didn't have mercy this time. Tyrell is currently serving a 5-year sentence in a state penitentiary for fraud and identity theft. I saw his mugshot. He looks angry. He looks like a man who still believes the world did this to him. He will have 5 years to think about the difference between a victim and a volunteer. Paige didn't fare much better, but her prison is one of her own making. Without Tyrell to blame and without my money to spend, she had to face the reality of her lack of skills. She was evicted from her parents' house after stealing her mother's jewelry to pay off a gambling debt she picked up trying to win back her fortune. The report says she is currently working as a cashier at a discount grocery store 3 towns over. She wears a name tag that just says Paige. She dyes her own hair now, and it is a brassy orange. The woman who once mocked my furniture for being old is now scanning coupons for people she used to look down on. She lives in a studio apartment above a laundromat. She is alone. Her friends from the country club don't visit. The social standing she killed for is gone. She is exactly where she deserves to be. I closed that part of the file. I felt no joy in reading it. I felt no vindication. I just felt the cold satisfaction of a structural engineer seeing a building collapse exactly how he predicted it would because the foundation was rotten. I opened the second part of the file. This one was thinner but heavier with meaning. It was the quarterly performance review from my manufacturing plant. I turned to the page for the logistics department. Jasmine Cross was listed as a shift supervisor. She had done it. She showed up at 6 a.m. every single day. She wore the steel-toed boots. She swept the floors. She learned how to operate the forklift. She didn't tell anyone she was the owner's daughter. She ate her lunch in the break room with the other workers. When a shipment of solar panels was delayed due to a storm, she stayed until midnight to reroute the supply chain manually, saving the company thousands of dollars. She didn't ask for overtime pay. She did it because the job needed to be done. The plant manager promoted her 3 months ago. He wrote a note in the file saying she was the hardest worker he had seen in 10 years. Jasmine sends me letters once a month. She never asks for money. She sends me drawings the grandchildren made. She tells me about the small apartment she rents near the school. She tells me that for the first time in her life she sleeps soundly because she knows exactly where her rent money is coming from. She earned it. I looked at the photo attached to the file. It was a picture of Jasmine on the factory floor wearing a hard hat and a safety vest. She was smiling. It wasn't the fake smile she used to wear at brunch when she wanted a check. It was a tired, genuine smile. She looked like me. She looked like Beatrice. She had found her dignity in the sweat of her brow. She wasn't wealthy. She probably never would be rich in the way I am. But she was safe. She was independent. And she was free from the curse of expectation. I closed the file. I didn't need to read anymore. Jasmine was going to be all right. I stood up and walked to the railing of the yacht. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. A steward approached with a bottle of champagne. "Mr. Freeman, would you like a glass?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, thank you." "And bring the papers." He returned with a leather binder. I uncapped my fountain pen. The documents were for the establishment of the Beatrice Cross Memorial Scholarship. I was endowing it with $10 million. It was designed for students who had no family support, students who had been forgotten by the system, students who were willing to work but just needed a door to open. It was the money Tyrell thought he would inherit. It was the money Paige thought would buy her trips to Paris. Now it was going to build engineers and doctors and teachers who understood the value of a dollar. I signed my name at the bottom, J.C. Freeman. The ink was black and permanent. I sipped the champagne. It tasted like victory. Not the loud, shouting victory of a battle won, but the quiet, enduring victory of a war ended. People say that family is everything. They say you stick by your blood no matter what. They are wrong. Family is a garden. You have to water it, you have to tend to it, but sometimes you have to weed it. If you let the weeds choke the flowers, you don't have a garden anymore, you have a graveyard. I loved my children enough to let them fall. I loved them enough to stop enabling their destruction. Tyrell is in a cage. Paige is in a purgatory of mediocrity. Jasmine is building a life. And me. I am finally living one. I looked out at the horizon where the sea met the sky. I wasn't waiting for a phone call anymore. I wasn't waiting for an anniversary dinner that no one would show up to. I wasn't Jeremiah Cross, the lonely widower in the big empty house. I was J.C. Freeman. I had a dinner reservation in town with a beautiful woman I met at the library in Rome. I had a business to run from my laptop. I had a legacy that would outlive my name. I raised my glass to the sunset. To Beatrice, I whispered, "We did good. It took a while and it hurt like hell, but we fixed it." I finished the drink and turned my back on the sea. I went inside to get dressed for dinner. The past was a foreign country and I had surrendered my citizenship. I had a future to attend to, and for the first time in 69 years it belonged entirely to me. The most painful truth I had to accept was that unconditional love does not require unconditional tolerance. For years I believed that being a good father meant shielding my children from reality, but I was merely robbing them of their potential while destroying my own dignity. We often cling to toxic relationships out of obligation to blood, but true family is built on mutual respect, not manipulation. By walking away, I didn't just save my financial legacy, I saved my soul. Setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, it is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You are never too old to rewrite your ending. If you agree that respect is the only currency that matters in a family, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and redemption.